Crime, Wine, and Chaos contains adult language and graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
You can run, but you can't hide, Chaos Kids. I'm Naomi.
Spooky. I'm Amber, and this is Crime, Wine, and Chaos. That was spooky, sister.
It's spooky season.
It is spooky season. What's new?
Oh my God. Well, you know that I mentioned to you earlier today that I am injured.
I know. I'm sorry.
Because I'm an old woman and I had a fall. So, I could have broken a hip, but I didn't break anything. Fortunately, I just my ego and my heart a little bit as I cried and limped back into the house with my busted up leg.
Jesus.
Covered in like road rash, basically. It's a whole thing. Anyway, this is, you know what? The side of my house can be very dangerous.
I know.
As you know, it is a very steep walkway.
Mm-hmm. It is very steep.
And yeah, I lost. And the sidewalk won. And now some of my DNA is deposited down the sidewalk.
I'm
to my
sorry.
House. It's fine.
God,
it's fine. Everything's fine. How are you, sister?
I am doing all right. Let me think. When is this released? Oh, it's released on the 15th. So plugging the show won't make sense. I'm good. I am good.
You know what? We can plug. Since this is releasing on the 15th. You know what else is happening on 15th?
Double episodes, because that is bonus day.
That is bonus day.
Gosh.
October bonus will land the same day as this not bonus episode. And if you are a member of the Chaos Kids Club on our patreon.com/crime, wine, and chaos, then you will have 2 episodes to listen to today as you listen to this. Sorry, I interrupted. What else is going on?
No, that was actually a good segue because we have a new Chaos Kid Club member.
We do. Do you have her name?
Her name is Felicia.
Felicia, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
So awesome. We're so close to another virtual wine night.
So close. We're so close. Speaking of wine, I am drinking a chilled white, a Chateau Saint Michel Pinot.
That's not normal for you. Are you?
It's not normal.
Okay, or
I'm on these meds that make wine taste weird.
Oh, that's right.
I've noticed that. Okay, I'm not the only one though. I've heard some other people say that red wine tastes like vinegar. And white and rosé seem to be okay. So,
well, you'll be off this medication soon, and then you can go back to your red wines tasting like they're supposed to.
Because I prefer red wine,
I know you do. You do. Yeah. I mean, me too. I mean, I don't drink it anymore, but
back in the day.
If I had to, yes, exactly. Gun to my head, which is really the only way that would happen at this point. Sister.
Right. Yeah.
You have a crime for me.
I do.
Your face right now. I am very concerned.
Why? Okay, well, listen. So I'm trying.
I could cry today. I could cry. That's the kind of week I'm having.
No,
I could cry today.
Please don't. No more falling down. No more crying. I'm doing in honor of spooky season. I am going to tell you the story of Cropsey.
Oh no!
Have you heard of Cropsey?
Oh yes, I've heard of Cropsey.
Okay, well tell me what you know, because this one was really hard to research.
Well, I saw this documentary about Cropsey. Did you watch that?
I did.
And it is hard to fully understand what was really going on. I feel like at the end of the documentary, I was not convinced that the guy that they said was Cropsey was actually Cropsey.
Samesies.
Okay.
Samesies.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So let's get into this, because this is one of those, the reason why this is so spooky and why this is great for October. And I'm excited to get into this with you and really talk about it, because it's that height of the late 70s, early 80s, there's boogeymen in the woods that are going to like steal your children or whatever kind of thing, which like kind of led us into, like satanic panic and all that kind of stuff that like, this is like that. This is one of those stories that kind of got that ball rolling. I feel
totally. It's also one of those where like, it's an urban legend that started from something real.
Yes.
And then got exaggerated,
Yes,
or whatever.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay,
All
let's do it. Tell me about it. Let's talk about Cropsey.
First, we're going to go to Staten Island in the 80s. Okay.
Yeah.
And the term Cropsey was coined by locals to be just kind of a generic term used to describe what their version of the boogeyman was.
Right.
Okay. So he was talked about around campfires at like Boy Scout campouts and at sleepovers. And the legend was that Cropsey was an escapee from the mental health hospital who lived in underground tunnels in the woods surrounding where the hospital used to be. And he snatched up children and brought them to his underground home.
I mean, this is classic urban legend stuff, right? This is like you're in your car, you're stranded, it's pouring down rain, you're listening to the news wire on the radio, and it's like crazy axe murderer has escaped from the mental ward and is on the loose. And then the next thing you know, there's like scraping on the roof of your car. And
Stop it. I just got chills. Yes.
Yes. Okay. It's that.
But do you remember this same sort of urban legend in our neighborhood?
Well, kind of, yeah, because we had that whole area where St. Edward's was went through various incarnations of whatever those buildings were used for. Like there was a seminary there, but like I know that at one point, like one of those buildings was some kind of hospital of some sort. There was a treatment center there for a long time. The women's rehabilitation center was in that same building for quite a while. So like there's like that old weird building where like I think maybe mental health patients were housed. I don't know for sure. Plus we grew up surrounded by woods, right? That whole state park, like right across from our neighborhood, all the way down to the lake was just solid Pacific Northwest woods. And then there was like all the woods over in like around Big Fin Hill and then like Big Spees. Like there was lots and lots of like wooded areas surrounding our neighborhoods.
Well, I specifically remember hearing, urban legends of somebody living in the woods in underground tunnels across from
really?
Like UFC.
Like in St. Ed's? That was like at St. Ed's? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the whole
that
thing.
makes sense. That makes sense. That
totally. Okay, so we're going to talk about Staten Island first during this time, and we have to talk about the Willowbrook School, which is tough.
Okay.
So it's we're using the term school loosely. So it opened on Staten Island in October 1947, and it initially admitted 20 disabled students from overcrowded institutions in like upstate New York. And they were children who were deemed as unable to be a part of society, which fuck right off.
Is this I'm sorry, I don't want to get ahead, but this is the same place that like Geraldo got famous for going.
Oh yeah, he makes an appearance in here.
Oh, yep. I love it. I love it when Geraldo makes an appearance. Okay.
This might be the only appearance that I welcome with Geraldo.
Sure. Yeah. Samesies. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So the school was built in a heavily forested area across 375 acres, and the buildings were actually connected by walkable underground tunnels for the employees.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah. And inside the school was fucking filthy. It was understaffed. There were 50 students per one employee. Yeah. And because of the lack of cleanliness and the overcrowding, there was just like disease outbreaks and it was terrible, right?
So it started out with like 20 kids and quickly bloomed into hundreds. More than thousands. It was, and way more than the facility was even built to accommodate. Correct?
Yeah. God, it's like you're in my brain. My next sentence is the maximum capacity was 4,000. And by 1965, it had more than 6,000.
How are there that many kids in New York that need to be in a quote unquote school, which is basically just like institutionalized and tossed away to be forgotten? I don't understand this.
Correct. I think it was, well, it's not it's not a school.
Not a
It's
school.
a place to put your child that you don't want to deal with and leave them there. So
100%, of course. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they were left completely on their own most of the time, and many of them were naked because there wasn't enough clothing to go around. It's disturbing. You can watch
I've
Geraldo's.
seen it. It's
Mhm.
so rough, dude. It's so fucking rough.
They were covered in their own urine and feces, and there was rampant physical and sexual abuse.
Of course there was.
Yeah. So on January 6, 1972, inside a small Staten Island diner, a former physician from Willowbrook State School met secretly with reporter Geraldo Rivera. The physician was fired for spilling the beans about the school, but not before he was able to give Geraldo a key to the school.
He gave him a key?
Yep.
Oh, I did not know. Oh.
So Geraldo went in with a 6-person film crew unannounced and captured some fucking appalling abuse, filth, overcrowding, all the things, right?
And if I remember correctly, because I have seen this, I've seen some of this footage, he literally was like, they would go into rooms that were just pitch black. And the only way you could see what was going on was like the light coming from like the camera crew. Spotlighting these kids on the floor, naked and filthy.
And just like shaking, rocking back and forth.
Yes.
Oh,
it's so...
It's disturbing.
So unsettling. It's so disturbing. Yeah. It's just the stuff of nightmares, literally.
It really is. Yeah. So unfortunately, after this, it still took another 10 years before the school was closed. So
10 years?
10 years.
And nothing changed in those 10 years?
There were some policies put into place, but it was still
basically the same.
It was still bullshit. Yeah.
God.
Oh, yeah. So now we'll talk about Andre Rand, who was first born Frank Ruchon on March 11th, 1944. His father died when he was 14, and his mother was institutionalized at Pilgrim Psychiatric Center in Brentwood, New York, and he and his sister would visit her as teenagers.
Oh.
I know. Between 1966 and 1968, using the name Frank, he worked as a custodian at the Willowbrook State School, but he was also known as a drifter, and it was known by many locals that he had made like makeshift campsites on and around the Willowbrook campus. Like he would come out of his tent in the morning and go to work.
Okay. Another guy that just like hangs out in the woods at night. This is not the first story where we've talked about someone like that. Remember the Gainesville Ripper? I think the serial killer in Gainesville.
Yes. Okay.
And there was like the guy that was reported as like hanging out in the woods at night.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it. So that's interesting that you bring that up, because what I was Googling to find spooky season stories was like horror stories or urban legends that were initially based off of something true.
Right.
And I learned that Scream, the movie, was loosely based off of, or the Gainesville Ripper was the inspiration behind Scream.
Right.
I didn't know that.
I thought you said that when we covered the story.
Okay, well, I learned it a second time.
You relearned.
I relearned it. I have to relearn a lot of things at this age.
Okay.
You fall down, I forget what's happening.
We are.
Okay, so on May 5th, 1969, so this is shortly after he was no longer employed at Willowbrook, he was arrested in South Bronx for kidnapping and attempting to rape a 9-year-old girl who he had enticed into his car and driven to a vacant lot. Did you catch any of this? Yeah. His clothes were removed and so were hers, but a passing police car interrupted the crime. He was charged with
the police officer actually accidentally stopped crime from happening? Is that what you just told me?
Or it was McGruff. He took a bite out of crime.
About McGruff. It's a sore subject in our family, remember?
Oh, God. Yeah. When the kids were traumatized by Papa moonlighting as McGruff.
Well, yeah, both the kids were traumatized ultimately by that whole experience. And you know what? We'll save that story for a virtual wine night. So join
sure.
the Patreon, go become a Chaos Kids Club member, and maybe you can come hang out with us and hear the story about McGruff the crime dog and the
Should
trauma
I
it caused to
come
our family.
as McGruff to Virtual One Night?
Challenge accepted.
Okay. I got to put that in my notes. Okay, so he's arrested and he ended up pleading guilty to sexual abuse and he was sentenced to 4 whole years.
4 whole years for
Yeah.
kidnapping and attempting to rape a 9-year-old. Great.
Correct. Yep. Cool. So he only served 16 months of that sentence and was paroled in 1972.
Oh, for God's sake.
And that's when he legally changed his name to Andre Rand. So it's like also he was like allowed to do that to like dodge like any, I don't even know if there was a sex offender registry, but either
There
way.
wasn't yet, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So he went on to commit a whole bunch of other offenses for, the next several years, most of them minor, including burglary. That's what it said. I don't consider burglary minor, but a minor home invasion here and there.
I mean, if it was like a business at night when no one was there,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
If you don't traumatize people, I guess.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who served 16 months of a 4-year sentence for abducting a child and attempting to rape her. So yeah, burglary's minor compared to that.
Okay, if we're using the comparison method, then
Just
yeah,
saying.
everything's minor compared to that. God.
I mean, what does he get for that? Like a fine and a slap on the wrist? I mean,
Yeah, he's just sort of in and out of jail. So then in 1979, he was accused of raping a young woman and a 15-year-old girl, but neither victim pressed charges.
Okay.
Yeah. Then in 1983, driving a school bus, he picked up a group of 11 children from the Staten Island YMCA and purchased a meal for them without the consent of any of their parents and took them to Newark Liberty National Airport. I don't know what he was going to do, like put him on a plane and go, but he was struggling to corral 11 children. And so he was apprehended.
There's a reason why we should pay childcare workers good money, because corralling 11 children is no small feat for a professional who does that for a living, let alone some rando who just happens to have a school bus on hand. Okay.
Okay, I feel like this has come up before too, but do you remember like the one time I did a birthday party for Jade at my house and I fully just lost control?
Was that the one with the piñata?
There was a piñata, there was Doritos and mac and cheese in the carpet. It was the one year that every kid in the class said, yes, they'll come.
It's like 30,
and it was
like
fucking
7-year-olds or whatever.
Chaos. It was chaos. I was Goldie Hawn and overboard at the end of that party. She needs food. Yeah. Okay, and so for snagging these kids, he was given a 10-month jail sentence for unlawful imprisonment, not kidnapping. Just
I gotta wonder, this was like in like the early to mid 80s when this happened.
That one was 1979.
I don't understand. Like, there are 11 kids on that bus. That's like potentially 22 parents who, if I were one of them, would be literally like mobbing with pitchforks for this guy. And he got 10 months. He didn't even get a month per kid.
I know. A month per kid.
That's insane.
I know. Man. Whew. The 80s, am I right? So here we go. On July 7th, 1972, so this is a few years earlier, 5-year-old Alice Pereira vanished from the area around the Tysons Lane apartments on Staten Island. Alice was playing in the building's lobby with her brother and disappeared around 3:30 p.m. after her brother briefly left her. She was never seen or heard from again, and Andre Rand was working as a painter at the Tysons Lane apartments at the time of Alice's disappearance. Okay, we're going to be getting into like, I'm not sure if this is the guy, but this is when kids start go missing, and this whole, weird guy in the woods and what's going on, it just starts to snowball, right?
Right.
Then 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes, she was last seen July of 1981. She had been sent out to buy a bar of soap, but never returned home. I love that the 7-year-old is being sent out to buy soap.
It's like we should it's like sending our niece to go buy a bar of soap. We've talked about this when we talked about April going like 2 blocks away in the neighborhood, and I was like, it was 2 blocks, and you're like, she's 8.
Yeah.
It would be like sending our niece like 2 blocks away. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, go get some
let's
soap.
be real. When I was like 10, mom would send me to fucking Bartell's with a check and her driver's license, and I would buy a carton of smokes for her.
I love God. That's even worse than soap.
Right?
My mom needs smokes. She can't go the 4 blocks.
Right.
Oh my God, that's so bad. Oh my God. Okay. So with Holly, Rand admitted to seeing Holly on the day she went missing, even claiming that they played hide and seek together. And there were witnesses who claimed to have seen Holly get in his car.
Okay.
Yeah. Then 11-year-old Tahasi Jackson was last seen leaving a hotel in Staten Island where she was living with her family after a fire in their apartment. I know. It was August of 1983, and she was asked to run an errand from another
How old was
resident. She was 11. Lots of errand running here. And she has not been seen since. A man matching Rand's description was seen loitering around the parking lot in the days before her disappearance. Rand was also known to have a camp less than half a mile away in a local cemetery.
Okay. I mean, it's like the correlation causation argument, right? Like, this is a small community. You got this weirdo living in it. He's always going to be nearby when the shit's going on, right?
I know. And it's like that thing of like the weird guy that walks around that looks sketch. Like, it's probably him.
But also he did legitimately have like a record of abducting, raping.
I know.
Driving off in school buses with kids.
I know. It's not funny. Driving off in school buses with kids. I know. All right. So then we go to 1987. 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger. She had Down syndrome. Poor little thing. After being spotted with Andre Rand, she goes missing. And after a very thorough search of the forested area, again, near the Willowbrook school where Rand sometimes camped, she was found in undergrowth in the woods near one of Rand's campsites. And she, unfortunately, was deceased. They found a leg and an arm sticking up out of a shallow grave. She's the only one of these kiddos that has been found.
That's the worst. Ugh.
I know. So this is when Rand was charged with first-degree murder of Jennifer. The jury could not come to a conclusion regarding the murder, but convicted him of her kidnapping.
What?
Yeah.
Juries are so fucking infuriating sometimes. Like, what are we doing, you guys?
Like, he kidnapped her, but somebody else murdered her? Like, what?
Yeah,
what do you mean?
Walk me through your logic, please. Was the death penalty on the table?
I'm not sure.
Maybe it has. Sometimes people are hesitant to convict of murder if death penalty's on the table because they don't trust. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know.
To me, then it should have been like murder in the second degree or something. But what do I know?
We're only FBI profilers. We're not lawyers.
No. No. So he was convicted of kidnapping Jennifer. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. This would have made him eligible for parole in 2008. So in 2004, charges were filed against him for the kidnapping of Holly Ann Hughes.
Which one was she?
She was the one who went to buy a bar of soap. So I feel like they quick swept in and charged him with that. And he was convicted of that. And now he will be eligible for parole in 2037.
But like by then, he'll be like a really old man, right?
Yeah. The thing is yes, he had those former charges, but there was no physical evidence linking him to any of this. Like physical.
There was basically a handful of like supposed eyewitnesses that saw him.
Correct.
And also like a town that had already just decided that he was the one.
Mm-hmm. He maintains his innocence. The thing that I couldn't find is like his sister said that they had like, before mom went off and all that. Not that they had a good childhood, but there was no abuse and there's no record of him having any mental health issues. But in footage of him like being apprehended, like he's like drooling. And have you seen that?
It's been a long time since I
Oh,
watched that film.
like, and I don't know if it's a performance or if there's something like seriously wrong. I don't know.
Or
It's hard to
drugs.
say.
Maybe there's drugs involved.
Maybe, but and then
I
there
mean,
was
it's
like, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
He's written letter like he wrote like a Happy Mother's Day something and sent it to a newspaper, and it just seemed like nonsensical scribbles. And this
Mm,
was after he had been in prison for many years. So I don't know. I feel like he was sort of scapegoated as like the town Cropsey, the boogeyman,
yes.
you know? And I don't
It's
love
really
that.
hard to say. Like, it's just a big question mark for me. I remember being really on the fence at the
Hmm.
end of watching that particular documentary. If it's the same one, which I think it is, that we watched,
Hmm.
'cause, it's an older documentary. It's been around for a while. It's like, yeah, it doesn't look good for him. It
No.
really doesn't look good for him at all. He's,
Mm-mm.
as they would say in cop circles, he's good for it.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like there's just so little real evidence. I mean, I guess the fact that they found her body, but the thing is like, here's the other thing I think about too, right? Like, this is,
Hmm.
if it was someone else, I would absolutely do everything possible to pin it on that guy. And so I
Yeah.
would absolutely dispose of her body near this guy's campsite because everybody
Hmm.
knew he had one and where it was, right?
Hmm.
And that this
Yeah.
guy was the town scapegoat. And that would be so easy to pin it on him,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Also terrifying to know that somebody like obviously this school was so fucked up in so many ways, but you have this guy who's working in a school with disabled children. Like, what are
Yeah.
we fucking
I
doing?
mean, well, everybody that was working in that school, right? I mean, like, with good conscience could have worked there at all for any period of time?
That one physician that bounced and then gave Geraldo a key.
That one guy. Yeah, that one
Mhm.
guy.
That
Yeah,
one guy. Oh, the
it's
whole
the whole
like
thing. Ugh.
really like sketchy boarding schools just gives me it's so upsetting. It gives me the creeps.
Well, I mean, that was that era too, where like that was this kind of stuff that inspired okay, we're closing down all these institutions that happened,
Mhm.
right? And then put a lot of these people on the streets. But like the infrastructure to support them outside of that was never put in place, right? And
Right.
so like the problem's never been solved. It's just been pushed out into the streets instead of like internally on the, responsibility of social services or government in any way.
Correct. Yeah.
But I just don't understand how a story like that could come out from Geraldo, right? Like that he had video footage. My understanding is that this was a national story. Like everybody in the
Mhm.
country knew about this, and not one parent of those children, of one of the children in there, was like fighting the good fight and keeping that story alive, you know?
They were, and my understanding is they fixed the employee to student ratio. I think they made an attempt at providing like the resources that they needed and all the things, but they still weren't getting proper care. It still wasn't a school. There was no curriculum. It was like
Right.
throw these
It was a
problem kids away and,
yeah, and forget about them.
Yeah.
The forgotten ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh,
God.
so
That whole
devastating.
story, sister, that whole story is just
Mm.
spooky ooky ooky.
Spooky ooky.
And I remember watching that and thinking that that location and that those buildings and that whole thing, it reminded me so much of St. Edward's. I
So
remember
much.
when we were kids and we would go down to St. Ed's and like there were some of those buildings weren't open and being used at the time. And I remember walking by and kind of peering in and being creeped out because it was like so classic institution looking on the
Mhm.
inside, right? Like horror movie fucking
Yeah.
shit. Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, it's spooky. It
Yeah,
is spooky.
totally.
Oh, I hate it.
Well, thanks for that,
You're so
sister.
welcome. Yep.
Um, let's get into some wackadoo chaos. sort of.
Woo.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you about James Scott and calling this James Scott Saboteur or Scapegoat.
Oh, maybe another scapegoat.
Maybe another scapegoat. How are we doing this? We keep doing these themes.
It's like we're related.
It's like we're related or something. Yeah. Okay. So it is the summer of 1993, and the American Midwest was experiencing massive amounts of torrential downpours. They had unprecedented snowfall that winter prior, and now it was raining so much that it had never been seen like this in at least a century. Some people even called this like the 500 years flood.
Whoa.
The news of the time was just devoted to the destruction being caused all over the Midwest as these unprecedented rains flooded the middle North American continent. And it is now referred to as the Great Flood of 1993.
Shit.
The Mississippi River is the primary river and second longest river of the largest drainage basin in the United States, running from Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota, winding its way south for 2,340 miles to the Mississippi River Delta in the Gulf of Mexico. The Mississippi River is more or less the border between Missouri and Illinois. Along this border is Quincy, Illinois, which is where the events I'm about to tell you about took place. So it's mid-July, and many residents, along with municipal employees, federal employees, the Army Corps of Engineers, like everyone, they're putting in a ton of work into mitigating as much as possible just how much flooding there would be in Quincy and West Quincy. Quincy proper is on the Illinois side of the river, and West Quincy is on the Missouri side of the river. So this was done by building levees. Okay, look, I don't know things. So I had to go find out, like, what exactly is a levee, right? Like, what does that mean? All I know about levees is that if they break, shit gets wet, right? If it keeps on raining. Turns out.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
You're
It's
welcome.
basically a wall built up to keep water out. And a lot of times they're made of clay or sand. Sometimes they're made of concrete, like the famous dikes in the Netherlands, which are built to keep the sea at bay. Because I guess like much of the Netherlands is actually below sea level.
Oh, shit.
So in Quincy, they built levees by building up the banks of the river with dredged sand that was covered in plastic sheets to reduce erosion while it kept raining. Some of the levees were actually built up by sand that was pushed by bulldozers from the land side, right? Like they would come at it and push it up and build up these like sand walls. And then they'd cover them in these giant sheets of plastic so that they wouldn't like wash away in the rain.
Gotcha.
So they're basically just building up bank walls along the river to keep the river in the river. Now, to be clear, this was happening all along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers all throughout this extraordinary rainy season. And many, many levees had failed despite these efforts, causing death and destruction as a result. In fact, by the time all was said and done come that October, there would be 50 people dead and $12 to $16 billion in damages caused by these floods.
Holy shit. Yikes. Okay.
Side note, Chaos kids may recall the little town of Grafton of the Erie Canal Soda Pop Festival fame. They reported to have a record 195 days of flooding that summer.
Oh my God.
Because if you remember, Grafton was on that little tiny corner of Illinois right next to Missouri. And like that was part of the deal. Remember? They like, you
it's
remember.
Like unincorporated or whatever.
Yes.
Like, can't touch us. We're over here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when on the evening of July 16th, after hours and hours and days of basically everyone in town and their mothers working on shoring up these levees in this all hands on deck situation, a levee on the riverbank between Quincy and West Quincy broke. It was considered by most to have been inevitable because so many had already failed.
Right.
A barge on the river was pulled into the breach in the levee, and it like ran right into a gas station, and that caught on fire.
What?
Yes.
Fuck. A whole ass barge?
A whole ass barge gets like, because the levee breaks, right? And so all the water is rushing out of the river, like through the break in the levee, like onto land, right? And that thrust of water rushing through that levee, like basically like sucked the barge with it. And it went into like the flood zone, like on land, and like ran into a gas station, and the gas station burst into flames.
Oh my God. As
the water flooded into West Quincy, it washed out all of the bridges in the area, which were the only way across the river for like 200 miles. Many people on the Missouri side of the river had to drive 80 miles to either St. Louis or Burlington, Iowa, fly, or take a ferry boat for weeks just to get to the other side of the river. One major bridge, the Bayview Bridge, was out of service for over 2 months.
Shit.
So it was a big fucking deal.
Yeah, no kidding.
And this was just like one area of this massive flooding throughout the Midwest that took place.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after the levee broke, a reporter nearby, Michelle McCormack of WGEM-TV, the NBC affiliate in Quincy, was covering the events. And some Department of Transportation workers told her, like, that dude over there was the first on the scene for this shit. So she walks up to him and has like a man on the street type interview.
Mm-hmm.
The man was James Scott, known to his friends and family as Jimmy.
Okay.
Jimmy told Michelle that he had seen a weak spot on the levee and tried to put more sandbags along it. He also said he went for a drink, and when he came back, discovered the levee had busted.
Oh.
And he then jumped in to help the Coast Guard load boats into the floodwaters.
He's just like a regular dude. He's not a levee builder.
That's right.
He's just like I saw it needed a sandbag, so I put one there.
That's right.
Okay.
And now remember though, like at this point, like the whole town, everybody is helping with these levees because it's just too much for like just, local authorities or whatever. Like literally like the Army Corps of Engineers, paramedics, mom, dad, everybody was working on keeping these levees built up.
Gotcha.
Jimmy grew up in Quincy, Illinois with his two brothers, Mike and Jeff. They were raised by their mom, Sharon. The three brothers were super tight with each other. Sharon described Jimmy as kind of a mastermind, like the leader of the brothers. And he would come up with a plan and they would all go make it happen. The three of them got into a lot of trouble when they were kids, mostly like normal kid stuff, smoking cigarettes, ringing doorbells in the middle of the night, building small fires in their yard. Mm-hmm. But Quincy is a small town. And so the Scott boys, especially Jimmy, got this reputation of being troublemakers. Mm-hmm. And then in 1982, when the three were 13, 12, and 11, they rode their bikes down to their old school that had been shut down the year before and broke in.
A minor crime, a minor burglary crime.
Just a minor crime.
Okay.
I mean, we are talking about like barely pubescent boys, breaking into a boarded up school, right? That's not in use anymore.
Sure.
I mean, come on. At least I would have done something like that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So they were wandering around. They were ransacking, looking for stuff, playing around in the school. And Mike and Jimmy were smoking cigarettes and they wouldn't let Jeff have one. So Mike's the oldest, Jeff's the youngest, and Jimmy's in the middle. But they let Jeff have the lighter, which they then dared him to hold to one of the curtains in the auditorium.
No.
The curtain went up in an instant, and Mike couldn't put the fire out. So the brothers ran in a panic, and then the whole place went up in flames.
Oh, fuck.
80 firefighters worked all night long, and the building was still burning the next morning.
Oh, my God.
And it was like this old historic building, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take long for police to figure out that it was the Scott brothers who caused this fire. The end result was Mike, the oldest, got probation until he turned 18. Jimmy, the instigator, was moved to a youth home to finish out the school year, and Jeff, the youngest, was sent to live with a foster family.
Oh.
By the end of the school year, all the boys were back home with Sharon, their mom, but now the town had opinions about all the Scotts.
Mm-hmm.
The boys were trouble. Sharon was unfit.
Okay. Wow.
After high school graduation, Jimmy spent a lot of his time just hanging out and drinking with like his older half brother Dan and setting small fires all the time.
He keeps setting fires, huh?
He keeps setting fires.
Okay. God,
He
Jimmy.
definitely engaged in like some petty theft. And whenever anything happened in Quincy, the cops' first stop was Jimmy's door. Where were you? What were you doing?
Uh-huh.
Around this time, Neil Baker was promoted to detective, and there were a series of arsons in town. Neil was able to connect all these arsons to Jimmy. Jimmy was 18 years old when he was charged with these arsons and served 3 years on a 7-year prison sentence.
Fuck.
After he got out of prison, he got a job at Burger King, married a woman named Susie, and went back to spending his free time hanging out drinking with Dan.
Also, I just want to point out that he got more time for his fire starting than Home Dude got for his abducting
Kidnapping
and
of 11 children in a school bus. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
So Neil Baker, this detective, he saw Jimmy on the news in that Man on the Street interview, and he was suspicious of Jimmy's version of events.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he have a very low opinion of Jimmy, but he also noted that Jimmy looked way too clean in that interview to have just come from having worked on the levee all day. And Jimmy seemed pretty vague about the details of the work he'd been doing at the levee. Jimmy was also not wearing a life jacket, which I guess everyone working on the levees was like supposed to wear or usually wore. That wasn't made clear.
There's also a whole ass gas station on fire behind him. Okay, Jimmy.
I wish to God that was what was behind him in that interview. I've seen like little clips of it. I've seen little clips of that interview, and all you can see behind him is like him and the reporter is like the river. But oh my God, it would be amazing.
I was trying to help.
Right? Started another fire.
Oh no.
He's not a pyromaniac. He's like a fire starter, literally. Like, I didn't mean to. I just looked at it. So Neil wasn't the only one who was suspicious of Jimmy. Other Missouri authorities also found the whole thing a bit sus. The levee failed at one of its strongest points, and that area had been inspected only 2 hours before it broke. When these authorities found out about Jimmy's criminal record, they decided to send county sheriffs out to question Jimmy. Well, sort of. They needed okay, so what happened was months actually went by, and then on October 1st, Jimmy gets picked up for questioning on like a grab bag of possible crimes, including check fraud and burglary. Oh. During his interrogation, they brought up this levee sabotage thing. Mm-hmm. And he supposedly admitted to pulling 4 sandbags from one portion of the levee and moving them to the trouble spot he claimed to have seen. He allegedly said, quote, "My town was in trouble. The folks in Quincy and West Quincy were about to lose everything. That's why I went down to the levee. I had no plans to hurt anything. They needed help, and so I helped." He very adamantly denied that he meant to cause any harm, but apparently he said, quote, "I didn't mean to cause a problem, but I did. I'm up shit creek."
Oh.
So he was released very shortly after this interview. He was only in the station for like an hour and a half, but he was eventually charged and convicted of burglary in January of the following year, so 1994, and he received a 10-year sentence.
Shit.
In the meantime, authorities in both Illinois and Missouri teamed up with the feds, including the FBI, to investigate this case. This investigation led them to Joe Flax, an old friend of Jimmy's. Joe told authorities that Jimmy told him that he broke the levee on purpose. According to Joe, Jimmy's wife Susie was in the town of Taylor on the Missouri side of the river. She worked as a waitress at a truck stop there. Supposedly, Jimmy wanted to be free to party and fish and fuck around with other women, and so he sabotaged the levee, causing this massive flooding and damage so that Susie would be stranded in Missouri and he could be a douchebag to his heart's content.
That is quite the... Okay. Can we just pop on over to the diner and like pop a tire or something. I mean, I'm not suggesting that he do that, but let me wipe out the entire town so that I can have a fun night. I don't think so. That sounds nuts.
Uh-huh. So these investigators were also able to find other witnesses to testify that Jimmy supposedly bragged about breaking the levee at a party after the flood.
Okay.
So with this newfound information, Jimmy gets hauled to Missouri in November of 1994 to stand trial.
Holy shit. What is this charge even?
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Jimmy was tried under a 1979 Missouri law that made it a crime to intentionally cause a catastrophe, which was defined as, quote, death or serious physical injury to 10 or more people, or substantial damage to 5 or more buildings or inhabitable structures, or substantial damage to a vital public facility which seriously impairs its usefulness or operation.
Okay. That happened.
That happened. Because of the publicity of the trial, you're going to love this, it was moved to Kirksville, about 68 miles west of Quincy. So,
Perfect.
like an hour away.
No one will know.
No one will know.
No one will know.
Perfect. According to investigators and the prosecution, Jimmy either removed or cut the plastic sheets covering the levee, then burrowed through the sand until the water rushed in.
Like a groundhog?
I guess.
What?
Or like a
He
sandworm?
burrowed?
I don't know.
Okay.
The prosecution's case was bolstered by inconsistencies in Jimmy's story, and these eyewitnesses who claimed to have heard Jimmy telling anyone who would listen, apparently, that he deliberately broke that fucking levee quite happily. Jimmy's defense relied heavily on soil science experts who testified that there was very strong evidence that the levee failed on its own. One of the experts said there had been something like 11 or 12 levee failures upriver from West Quincy. And the other expert said a last-minute decision to bring in bulldozers to shore up the levee actually weakened its structural integrity.
Sounds like he has a good defense team.
The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, and Jimmy was convicted of causing a catastrophe.
What?
A month later, he was sentenced to life in prison.
I don't have any words.
I know.
Life
your face
in
says
prison?
Life in prison.
For allegedly moving a sandbag?
Yep.
Cool.
For sabotaging the levee.
Okay. Wow.
Jimmy is the only person arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced with knowingly causing a catastrophe. At sentencing, the judge said, are you ready for this? Quote, I can't take your property as you took theirs, but I can take your liberty, which I hope, as you have time to contemplate, that you will come to find is more precious. You are a career criminal. There is a perversion about this because you obviously get a sense of excitement or power or sexual arousal or all of the above when you commit these acts.
Whoa.
And the communities of Quincy and West Quincy were happy with this outcome. In February of 1997, Jimmy had an appeal in front of the Missouri Court of Appeals, who threw out the conviction due to prosecutorial misconduct.
Good.
Prosecutors had failed to disclose to Jimmy's defense attorneys the 2 witnesses who supposedly heard Jimmy say he deliberately busted that levee. A year later, Missouri tried Jimmy again, and he was again convicted on April 30th, 1998, and by July, his original sentence was reinstated.
What the fuck?
He would be eligible for parole in 2023.
Oh, it gets worse.
And then, somewhere in the early 2000s, an investigative journalist, Adam Pitluck, wrote a book, Damned to Eternity. I couldn't get my hands on this book in a timely manner because it's only available, as far as I can tell, on Amazon in a hardcover physical copy. It was published in 2007, I think. And then Vice News did a YouTube documentary about Jimmy Scott's case that Adam participated in. Anyway, Adam had gone digging and he found out some things that were very interesting.
Oh.
For one, the motive of wanting to strand his wife in Missouri and party was actually introduced at Jimmy's second trial, and that this Joe Flax guy testified to this then, but not originally in the first trial.
That's a problem.
And then Adam tried to track this guy, Joe, down to interview him while Adam was working on the book. But this Joe guy basically told him he would only talk if Adam paid him. And Adam told Joe, that's not how journalism works. I'm not going to pay you. Mm-mm. So Adam never got an interview with Joe. And so in this Vice doc, Adam actually, this is from like last year, like this Vice doc came out like about a year ago. And he participated in this documentary. And so Adam tries to go find Joe again. And he's unsuccessful. And it's worth noting that at the time that Joe testified, he was also sitting in prison for his own run-ins with the law. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, Jimmy was convicted on purely circumstantial evidence, zero physical evidence, and not even super compelling circumstantial evidence when you really get down to it. Mm-mm. There's plenty of circumstantial evidence that points to his innocence as well. The fact is, so many levies had failed that summer. It was so possible that that levee was going to fail no matter what.
Right.
In fact, one of the soil experts for the defense has maintained for almost 30 years that the levee was going to break, period. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. The area that was flooded when that levee broke included over 14,000 acres of agricultural land, which was like the bread and butter of the people of this area.
Right.
And the potential of a levee failure put a whole shit ton of summer crops at risk of being wiped out. One of the farmers of these crops, in fact, the largest owner of land on the Missouri side of the river in West Quincy, was Norman Hare, who also happened to be the Fabius River Levee Drainage District Commission chair in 1993.
Okay.
Norman had also been a witness for the prosecution in Jimmy's trial. And this was the only location in which insurance paid for damages, and they did because a human created the disaster.
What the fuck?
These insurance policies for farms along the Mississippi there in Missouri would not pay out damages due to acts of God. Mm-hmm. And Norman built himself a nice new house after that flooding because he testified for the prosecution that it was not an act of God that his fields were flooded. It was the malicious act of Jimmy Scott. And these farmers did not have FEMA coverage that would pay out for flooding, but they did have insurance that covered vandalism.
This is so fucked up.
Yep.
I hate this.
The Vice documentary on YouTube was published about a year ago, like I said. And at that time, Jimmy was supposed to have had a parole hearing in 2021, and it was postponed until July 2026. And he will not be eligible to be released until 2028. By 2028, he will have spent, I think, 34 years in prison for a crime he very well may not have committed.
Fuck. This is gross.
Adam Pitluck started a GoFundMe for Jimmy's legal fund. As of July of this year, he had raised just over $6,000. All the money raised will go to Jimmy's legal team or to Jimmy directly, and I'll post a link to that in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Jimmy's mom, Sharon, who has been his only connection to life outside of prison and held fast to his innocence all these years, the only one besides Adam still standing up for Jimmy, she passed away right around the time of the filming of that Vice doc.
Oh, God.
And that is the story of James Scott.
I hate that story.
I'm sorry, sister.
What about his brothers? They're not on Team Jimmy?
The documentary didn't talk about his brothers. I didn't see much mention about his brothers at all, so I don't really know what's up with his brothers.
I hate that. Oh,
in fact,
that
I got some
gross.
of the information from a transcript of an episode of Criminal. Phoebe Judge actually covered the story way back in like 2017.
I love Phoebe Judge.
I know you do. That's why I wanted to make sure you knew that.
She has such a soothing voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, sister, that bummed me out.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's what we do here.
That's what we do here. Sometimes even our chaos stories are a big fat bummer. And, you know, it was interesting to do that story because initially, like, I had seen, like, I don't know, maybe in listicles or something, like the story of like the dude who wanted to party and cheat on his wife. So he like flooded an entire town. And I was like, what? And so I was like, oh, I'm covering that. That's a crazy chaos story. What a douchebag. And then I started doing the research and I was like, oh, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
This guy does not deserve to spend life in prison, even if he did it, even if it's true. No one died, right? He didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
He was not a violent criminal. In fact, in the Vice doc, I'll also link to that. Adam interviews him in prison again, because he actually interviewed him way back in like the early 2000s when that's how he ended up writing the book in the first place. He was like a student at Mizzou. Hello. Shout out to Mizzou. His journalist teacher sent him off to go interview him in prison. So the first time they met, Adam was in college and Jimmy wasn't even that much older than Adam. They were both like, guys in their 20s. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, so he goes back to interview Jimmy again for this documentary. And Jimmy's basically saying like, I haven't raped anyone, killed anyone, right? Like I sodomite, right? Like I've done none of these violent crimes or any kind of crime where like a human was harmed and like DNA might be involved. So like none of these innocent projects types will like take on his case because they don't have like the only way he is going to get out of prison if they won't parole him is if the governor pardons him. And they probably won't parole him because Jimmy refuses to like show up and be remorseful and like,
right.
Because he's like, I didn't fucking do that.
Yeah. Oh God. It's so fucked up. Oh, I hate that.
Super fucked up.
So I hate
you're welcome.
that. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Go to the order. Go do all the things. You guys know we're on all the things.
All the things. Sign up for the Chaos Kids Club on our Patreon.
Come listen to the bonus episode that dropped today.
Yeah.
It's weird to say things like that because
I know.
A week and a half out. But anyway, do that and, follow us. And, wherever you're listening, go give us a rating. And if you've got an Apple product, just go find us on the Apple podcast. Even if you don't listen to us there, go find us on there. And give us a rating and write us a little review. We love it when you guys write us a review. We
do love a good review or a bad review. An honest review.
Just give us an honest review.
Yeah.
We love an honest review.
We're
always open for feedback. So send it our way. If you want to tell us anything and like long form, you can email us. You can send Amber love letters. You can send me hate mail. And you got to send them both to the same place, crimewineandchaos@gmail.com. And we'll read it.
Yeah, we will.
And we'll cry and we'll laugh and maybe we'll respond. So, sister.
Yeah.
Man, we did it again. And
love you.
Was fucking chaotic. I love you too.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Crime, Wine, and Chaos is produced by 8th Direction Records. Artwork by Joshua M. Davis. Music by Paul Abner. If you would like to support the show, you can visit our Patreon page at crimewineandchaos.com/Patreon. Cheers.
Yes. Women of a certain age.
Fuck.